Welcome to Clip Creep. Today we will be looking at the top 5 scariest real-life haunted dolls. Make sure to like the video and comment what you want to see next. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to subscribe if you are watching on YouTube, or follow us on Rumble, to make sure you don't miss any of our uploads. Now, let's begin.
Mandy the Haunted Doll is currently on display in the Canal and District Museum in Canada. Mandy, a doll created sometime between 1900 and 1920, was given to the museum by a donor who wished to remain anonymous. The donor had a chilling experience with the doll and wished to get rid of it without destroying whatever historic quality it possessed. One night, the donor was awoken by extremely loud cries, the cries of a baby that were echoing and radiating from the basement where the doll had been left. Only one problem: a baby was not present in the house at this time of night. After hours of listening to the shrieks, the donor finally mustered up the courage to sneak into the basement and examine the source of the cries. Upon arrival, they found nothing but an open window, and Mandy was missing. Only to return the next morning. After dropping Mandy the Haunted Doll off at the museum, the donor confirmed that an experience like that never occurred again. However, the arrival of Mandy at the Canal and District Museum started a new wave of distress and discomfort for the staff and visitors there. Almost immediately after being placed in front of the front door, staff members started reporting that their lunches were going missing, only to show up neatly tucked in random drawers hours later. Books and stationery started going missing on a routine basis, too. Eventually Mandy had to be moved to a more private display, one away from other dolls of her kind, because it is rumored that she would topple them over in the middle of the night due to some sort of jealousy. Mandy the Haunted Doll was heavily featured in a 1999 issue of Supernatural Stories around British Columbia, and that's when people started flocking to the museum to see the haunted doll for themselves. People who visited the decades-old toy had trouble getting pictures of Mandy because their batteries would die or the flash of their cameras would inexplicably turn on and off while trying to take photos. Psychic investigators who have visited Mandy state that the doll is most likely possessed by the spirit of a young, little girl who only wants attention from people around her. That's why the doll is only mischievous and never violent towards humans. One of the world's most haunted dolls is believed to be possessed by the dead lives in Warwick, Australia. Letta the 200-year-old haunted doll is described by some as the doll from hell. It has strange powers that terrify anyone who comes into contact with it. It has appeared on television shows and in newspapers around the world. The wooden, child-sized doll has been in Kerry Walton's possession for about 40 years after he stumbled across it underneath a haunted house in Wagga Wagga. In the early 1970s, Mr. Walton and his brother decided to explore the deserted house. This was when he first laid eyes on Letta Meow's grotesque face. "I wasn't quite sure what it was terrifying seeing that face in the dark," he said. He makes Chucky look like a Sunday school student. When Mr. Walton brought the doll back to his home in Queensland, strange things began to happen. The first sign of the doll's eerie powers was when his 2 children woke up screaming one night saying the doll was talking and moving its head. Many people over the years have also said they have seen it move. It's not only humans who are freaked out by the doll. Letta Meow cannot be around any dogs. Dogs absolutely hate him. They try to attack him and bite him whenever he is around. Cats are indifferent but dogs can sense and feel things, Mr. Walton said. A few years after Letta Meow joined the Waltons, the family was struggling financially, so Mr. Walton decided to sell the doll. "We were really desperate for cash at the time, so I drove him to a woman's home who was going to buy him for $400, he said. "I physically couldn't get him out of the car. I can't explain it. It was some sort of force stopping me. These days I wouldn't sell him for $1 million, but to be honest I don't think I physically can." Letta Meow has appeared on many television programs and is often accompanied by a seance. Mr. Walton said each seance said the same thing. They believe the doll has a spirit of a young boy inside who died many years ago in a drowning, he said. That is why it always rains when I take him anywhere. Mr. Walton has had the doll checked out by scientists at the Australian Museum in Sydney. Based on the nails in his shoes, they predict Letta out is 200 years old and was handcrafted by wandering gypsies in Eastern Europe. It is made from wood, with real human hair, has glass eyes that see all and also has some sort of brain. In 1918, a young man purchased the doll that would later on claim the name of Okiku as her own for his 2-year-old sister, and the legend would kickstart a tourism flash. The doll was bought in Sapporo by a 17-year-old Eikichi Suzuki in 1918, for his 2-year-old sister Okiku. He was touring the region for a maritime exhibition, and the doll instantly drew his eyes. The perfect little thing sat on a shop window enticing him. Suzuki didn't think twice, he went in and instantly purchased the figurine for his sister, used the last of his money for it. At about 40 centimeters tall and dressed in a traditional kimono, the doll was exquisite. Its hair was raven black and cut to roughly shoulder length, in a traditional okappa hairstyle. Her eyes were piercing coals that seemed to swallow everything up in their gaze. Suzuki went back home and gave the doll to his little sister. She fell in love with the doll immediately. It transformed into Okiku's favorite toy and her best friend. Okiku played every day with the doll, took it everywhere, and treated the figurine like a little sister. She would talk it, feed it, sleep with it. She decided to call the doll Okiku, a mirror duplicate of herself. The doll never left Okiku's sight. Then, a year later, tragedy struck. In 1919, Okiku died. Yellow fever had descended on the land and rubbed the family of the little girl. Okiku died gasping for air, in pain and afraid, the doll held firmly in her grasp. She was only 3 years old. The family wanted to bury the doll along with Okiku, but circumstances and governmental oversight prevented this last act of kindness on their part. The doll was never laid to rest with Okiku. Okiku, the doll, was alternatively located in the family's altar, a common practice in certain Japan's households to commemorate the dead. The small shrine celebrated their daughter and marked her passing into the afterlife. That's when the weirdness started to occur. One day, the family started to notice that the doll's hair was getting longer. Once a traditional shoulder-length cut with neat ends, now a mangled mess of split ends reaching down past her waist. It was scruffy, different colors, and felt different. At night, they started to dream of Okiku, and sometimes the doll would appear by their side come morning. The chillings events intensified and grew into full-blown acts of spiritual infestation, lights flicking on and off, bangings in the house, noises, and strange voices. The closer the year got to certain key dates, Okiku's birthday and the day of her death. Over time, they were certain and town spiritual leaders concurred that their daughter's soul was in fact trapped within the doll. In 1938, the family relocated to a different district. They had by now become accustomed to Okiku and had even grown fond of their daughter's restless spirit. To them, it was a magical and a unique opportunity to interact with the dead. Not desiring to take Okiku with them, fearing that what fueled her magic was the proximity to their daughter's grave, the family approached the local temple and asked them to take care of the doll. They were fascinated with the prospect. The priests accepted the charge and started taking care of Okiku. Over time, they've managed to confirm the veracity of some of the claims, particularly that the hair does indeed grow. As the years passed on, the doll's fame grew and her powers further developed. She's bolder now, invading the dreams of the priest and those that come to visit her. She's stronger, her hair growing faster and wilder. And, she's even spookier. The lasted event driving tourists mad is the frightening claim is that the mouth of Okiku is slowly opening and that if you dare to peer inside you may be able to glimpse something like baby teeth spouting like weeds from porcelain gums. Okiku is located in her private shrine, on display in a little wooden box, in the Mananji Temple in the town of Iwamizawa, Hokkaido, Japan. Annabelle is an allegedly haunted Raggedy Ann doll, housed in the now closed occult museum of the paranormal investigators Ed and Lorraine Warren. Annabelle was moved there after supposed hauntings in 1970. A character based on the doll is one of the antagonists that appear in the Conjuring universe. According to the Warrens, a student nurse was given the doll in 1971. They said that the doll behaved strangely, and that a psychic medium told the student that the doll was inhabited by the spirit of a deceased girl named Annabelle. The student and her roommate tried to accept and nurture the spirit-possessed doll, but the doll reportedly exhibited malicious and frightening behavior. It was at this point that the Warrens say they were first contacted, moving the doll to their museum after pronouncing it demonically possessed. The doll remained in a glass box at the Warrens Occult Museum in Monroe, Connecticut until the museum's closing. Tracking back, Annabelle was given to Donna, who was a student nurse, as a birthday gift by her mother. One thing to remember, Annabelle was bought secondhand from a hobby store. She was living with her friend Angie at the time. Annabelle made only very small movements to begin with, that could be put down to Donna and Angie accidentally moving her. For example, ending up on the floor instead of on the chair. Maybe she just fell off. Soon, the movement started to increase, and the doll started to move more. She may have ended up on the couch instead of on Donna's bed, or outside Angie's door immediately after she was returned to Donna's room. Their close friend Lou was very nervous of the seemingly innocent Raggedy doll. He believed that she was evil, or possessed, and that something needed to be done about it. But Donna and Annie were very progressive in their views and didn't think anything of the sort, and still believed that perhaps they were to blame for the movements of the doll. The Annabelle doll story quickly became more sinister. Soon, the girls started to find notes around their apartment. The strange thing was that the notes were written on parchment paper, and neither of the two girls had ever used parchment paper before. The notes said various things, but most commonly, they said things like, "Help Lou," and "Help us." Donna came home from work one day and found the doll in her usual spot on her bed, but unfortunately she had literal blood on her hands. It seemed almost like the blood or the red liquid, whatever it was coming from the doll itself. That was it. It was time for the girls to call in some help in the form of a medium to find out just what was going on with this doll before things got worse. The first medium sat down with the girls and Annabelle, Scary doll, and the story that Donna and Angie were given was that the land on which their apartment complex was built used to be a field. A young girl, aged around 7 years old, was found dead there many years before. When the doll came into their apartment, Annabelle's spirit was still in the area in which she died, and because she was fond of the doll, her spirit became one with it. Annabelle became Annabelle the doll. Donna and Angie were very loving and giving because they felt sorry for the poor girl that had been found dead alone in that field. They wanted the doll to stay because they didn't want her to be left alone. Lou was the one who was attacked by Annabelle before the Warrens were called in. He was the one that she showed her true self to. A few things occurred, including some bad dreams and some visions of Annabelle, but the attack that made Donna and Angie call the Warrens was a physical one. Angie and Lou were spending some time together when they heard movement in Donna's room, but she wasn't at home. They were frozen in fear. At first they were concerned about an intruder, but they quickly realized that the movement was in fact Annabelle. Lou took a look inside Donna's room and there was no one inside, although the doll was sitting on a chair instead of sitting on the bed where she should have been. He moved forwards toward Annabelle and a feeling crept over him, that creeping feeling you get where something is terribly, terribly wrong. He felt a terrible pain on his chest, and realized that there was a series of claw marks, raking marks like someone had leapt at him and roughly scratched him. No one was in the room, and so he knew that the marks must have come from Annabelle. What was stranger still about these scratches is that they healed straight away, and within just 2 days there was no trace of them at all. The Warrens were then called in. A priest was called into the apartment along with the Warrens, and it was discovered that Annabelle's main goal was to take possession of Donna's soul. Annabelle was a demon. She was attached to the doll. The Warrens said that demons don't possess items or things, instead, they possess people. The priest eventually exorcised the apartment, and the Warrens took Annabelle away with them. They both agreed that it would be best to drive home on the back roads, worried that if they drove on the main highways that Annabelle would find a way to cause an accident. Sure enough, they were plagued with car problems the whole way home. The power steering failed, the brakes failed, and the engine of the car kept stalling. The problems ceased for a little while once Ed Warren sprinkled Annabelle with some holy water. Once the pair got home, Ed put the doll on his desk, thinking that she'd be safe there for a little while. However, Annabelle was seen rising above the desk, levitating, on multiple occasions. Soon, that activity slowed down and stopped, and the Warrens thought that perhaps the demon had quieted. But she was soon found in different rooms of the house, moving around. The Warrens called the priest, but he didn't take it too seriously, and said to Annabelle that she couldn't hurt him because she was just a doll. Soon after, he was in a car accident on the way home. The car turned over, the brakes failed, and his car was completely written off. Although the priest was badly hurt, he did survive. Annabelle is still around today, residing in the locked glass case that the Warrens built to keep her from getting free and roaming around their house. There is a warning sign on the case, saying, "Do not touch," as well as a cross. Some say that they see Annabelle moving around the case, waiting to get free.
The story of Robert the doll dates back to the early 1900s when a young boy named Eugene Robert Otto was given a one-of-a-kind handmade doll by a servant that worked for his parents in his home. Eugene, who everyone called Gene, named the doll Robert and quickly became attached to his new friend. While he seemed like an ordinary cloth doll, it wasn't long before Robert was involved in strange and somewhat terrifying events. The first hint that something out of the ordinary was happening was one night when Gene, who was only 10 years old, awoke to find Robert the doll sitting at the end of his bed staring at him. Moments later his mother was awakened by his screams for help and the sounds of furniture being overturned in her son's bedroom. Gene cried for help, begging his mother to rescue him. When she finally was able to wrench the locked door open, she saw poor Gene curled up in fear on his bed, his room in shambles, and Robert the doll sitting at the foot of the bed. Nobody knows for sure why or how this child's plaything could actually wreak havoc on a child's bedroom or do anything at all. After all, it was just a toy, right? But the weird and inexplicable didn't stop at that one occurrence. Gene's parents would often hear their son upstairs talking to the doll and getting a response back in a totally different voice. They reported seeing the doll speak and witnessing his expression change. Giggling and sightings of Robert running up the steps or staring out the upstairs window were also reported. Robert continued to live with Gene throughout his lifetime, and after Gene's parents died, he moved back into their home with his wife, Anne. Gene decided that the doll needed a room of his own and placed him in the upstairs room that had a window overlooking the street. Anne felt uneasy with Robert in the house, and although she couldn't put her finger on it, she wanted Gene to lock the doll up in the attic where he could do no harm. Gene conceded, and as one could imagine, Robert the doll was not happy with his new digs. Soon, visitors to the home heard footsteps in the attic, the sounds of someone pacing back and forth and devilish giggling. Neighborhood children reported seeing Robert watching them from the window in the upstairs bedroom and told accounts of the doll actually mocking them as they walked to school. When Gene heard this, he immediately went to investigate, knowing that he had locked Robert in the attic and there was no way he could be sitting by the window of the upstairs bedroom. But to his complete shock, when he opened the door to the bedroom, there was Robert, sitting in the rocking chair by the window. Gene locked Robert back up in the attic several times, each time discovering him again sitting by the window in the same upstairs bedroom. Gene Otto died in 1974, and when a new owner moved into the house on Eden Street, their 10-year-old daughter was delighted to find Robert the doll in the attic. But her delight ended soon when she claimed that Robert was alive and that the doll wanted to hurt her. She awoke often in the middle of the night screaming in fear and told her parents that Robert had moved about in the room. It wasn't long before Robert the doll was given away, and today he lives in the East Martello fort where visitors from all over the world come to see him. Many believe that the origin of Robert's evil lies in the one who originally gave him to Jean Otto, the servant who worked for Jean's parents. But one thing remains constant: Robert the doll continues to taunt and scare those who come to view him, especially guests to the museum who attempt to take photos. Many have reported their cameras becoming inoperable when they tried to take a picture of Robert, only to begin working again when they left the museum. Robert the doll sits inside a glass case, but it doesn't seem to stop him from inflicting fear and discomfort to museum staff and visitors. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed, make sure to like the video and leave a comment with what you want to see next. If you are watching on YouTube, subscribe to keep up to date with our videos. If you are watching on Rumble, make sure to follow us, so you never miss a video. See you soon.